The Second Punic War, when elephants crossed the Alps and Rome got really annoyed. The Second Punic War, or, as historians like to call it, Hannibal's excellent misadventure. This wasn't your average Mediterranean spat. No, this was a globe-trotting brawl stretching from Spain to Italy, with pit stops in Sicily, Sardinia, and the sun-scorched sands of North Africa. Because when ancient superpowers got bored, they didn't play chess, they launched multi-theater wars. On Team Carthage, we had Hannibal Barca, a military genius with a personal vendetta, a dream, and a ridiculous number of war elephants. His pitch, march over the Alps, surprise the Romans, and ruin their day. And to be fair, it almost worked. Romans were stunned. Elephants? In the snow? Seriously? But never underestimate Roman stubbornness. Enter Scipio Africanus, Rome's own military prodigy, who said, "Cool elephants, Hannibal. Mind if I sack your hometown?" Instead of chasing Hannibal across Italy like everyone else, Scipio took the fight to North Africa, flipped the script, and smacked Carthage hard enough that even Hannibal had to rush home and take the L. So yes, Carthage lost. Again, that's 2 strikes. And while they dust themselves off and come back 50 years later for the Third Punic War, spoiler alert, third time was not the charm. That final defeat would erase Carthage from the list of Mediterranean VIPs for good. The Second Punic War, Spain, salt, and seriously expensive regrets. Let's rewind to 241 BCE. The First Punic War had just wrapped up, and Carthage was licking its wounds after losing what was basically the ancient world's longest and most awkward breakup. As part of the "we surrender, but let's pretend we're still dignified" clause, Carthage had a hand over Sicily and cough up 3,200 talents in reparations. That's right. Rome didn't just beat them, it sent them the bill. Sure, the First Punic War drained both sides, but Rome had this annoying superpower called endless manpower and a fleet factory that might as well have printed triremes on demand. Carthage? Not so much. Rome flexed its new sea muscles and became the boss of the Mediterranean. Carthage, meanwhile, got stuck with the ancient equivalent of a very expensive parking ticket and no navy to fight it. So what did Carthage do next? Simple. If they couldn't rule the waves, they'd try to dominate the land instead. But land wars aren't cheap. You can't just show up to Spain and expect to conquer it with good intentions and leftover elephants. You need cash. Lots of it. Spain, rich in silver and resources, became Carthage's new piggy bank, and their not-so-subtle plan to fund a revenge tour against Rome. And thus, we arrive at the financial roots of the Second Punic War. One side drowning in silver dreams, the other watching nervously as their old enemy got suspiciously quiet and suspiciously rich. The Second Punic War. How not paying your mercenaries sparked a global crisis. Before Carthage could plot its revenge in the Second Punic War, it had to deal with a minor detail. The entire western half of its empire was on fire. Welcome to the Truceless War, which, spoiler alert, was exactly as diplomatic as it sounds. Imagine fighting for 20 years in the First Punic War and then being told, "Thanks for your service, but we're a bit short on cash." That's what Carthage did to its mercenaries. Naturally, these unpaid professionals teamed up with local Libyans in rebellious cities like Tunis and Utica to start what was basically the ancient world's version of a labor strike, with swords. In desperation, Carthage called in Hannibal Barca, the dad of that other guy you definitely know, to clean up the mess. Teaming up with Hanno the Great, because apparently ancient generals came with PR-approved titles, they crushed the rebellion. Meanwhile, Rome, ever the opportunistic landlord, just casually stole Sardinia, Carthage's top grain hub, because hey, what are rivals for? With no navy, no grain, and no fortresses left in Sicily, Sardinia, or Corsica, Carthage had one option left: get rich or die trying, in Spain. The silver-rich Iberian Peninsula had long been a Carthaginian piggy bank, so in 237 BCE, Hamilcar packed his bags, sailed off, and got to work. He expanded Carthaginian territory, founded Acre Lus, based himself at Gades, modern Cadiz, and built a small startup army of 50,000 men and 100 war elephants. Funding? Easy. Just take tribute, dig some silver mines, and voila, instant empire. When Hamilcar drowned in 229 BC, yes, literally drowned. Not very epic, but effective, his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair took over and doubled down on army size and elephant count. By the time he exited the scene, Carthage owned half of Spain and had a war machine ready to roll. Then in 221 BCE, the real show began. Hannibal, Hamilcar's son, a 26-year-old prodigy with daddy issues and a lifelong grudge against Rome, courtesy of a blood oath sworn as a child. With money, men, and 200 elephants, he was ready to make Rome regret everything. And thus, the stage was set for the Second Punic War, with silver-fueled vengeance, teenage angst, and elephant-powered ambition. The Second Punic War, when Hannibal said screw treaties and took the scenic route over the Alps. In 226 BCE, Carthage agreed, with a totally straight face, not to cross the river Ebro in Spain. Rome, already side-eyeing Carthage's real estate spree across Iberia, wanted to draw a nice, peaceful line in the sand. Hasdrubal the Fair said, "Sure, totally won't cross that river." Then he died, and in walked Hannibal, the human equivalent of what treaty? Hannibal, now the big boss in Spain, looked at the Ebro line, looked at Rome, and then said, "Hold my trench coat." In 219 BCE, he stormed inland and laid siege to Saguntum, a longtime Roman BFF sitting just outside the do-not-touch zone. And despite knowing it might tick off Rome, the Carthaginian government shrugged and gave Hannibal the green light. Rome, fresh off squashing Gauls and cleaning up Illyria, was feeling confident and demanded Carthage hand over Hannibal for some ancient justice. Carthage, ever the passive-aggressive empire, politely declined. Rome responded the only way it knew how, by declaring the Second Punic War in 218 BCE. Cue dramatic music. Hannibal's surprise Italy vacation, brought to you by war elephants. Rome, assuming Hannibal would play fair and sit still in Spain, sent one army to Iberia and another toward Sicily. What they didn't expect, Hannibal packing up his elephants and going full action hero, taking the longest, deadliest detour possible over the Alps. His plan? Strike Italy itself. If you can't beat Rome from the outside, stir up the neighbors, invade the countryside, and maybe, just maybe, collapse the empire from within. Leaving his brother Hasdrubal in charge of Spain, Hannibal grabbed 90,000 soldiers, 12,000 cavalry, and what we can only assume were some very confused elephants, then marched straight into the frozen jaws of nature's obstacle course. 15 days later, after hostile Gallic tribes, mass desertions, and probably lots of yelling, Hannibal popped out on the other side of the Alps with just 20,000 men and half his cavalry. No one knows how many elephants made it, but rest assured, it wasn't the full dozen. But the moment he arrived in Italy, the locals started cheering. The northern Gauls, sick of Roman taxes and Roman attitudes, were all too happy to join Hannibal's anti-Rome fan club. With fresh troops and renewed fire, Hannibal pushed forward. Because why stop now when you've already broken every rule in the book? The Second Punic War was no longer a matter of if. It was a matter of how much chaos one man and a handful of elephants could unleash across the Roman Republic. The Second Punic War, Hannibal's hot streak, and Rome's hot mess. If there was a worst year to be a Roman award, 218 BCE would win hands down, and it was just the beginning of the Second Punic War's humiliation tour. Hannibal kicked off his Italian vacation by absolutely wrecking Roman forces at the Ticinus River near Pavia. Then, just in time for the holidays, he steamrolled another Roman army at the Trebia River in December. That's 2 less for Rome before the snow even melted. Then came Lake Trasimene in June 217 BCE. Picture this: a foggy morning, Romans marching along a lakeside path, and bam! Hannibal springs a trap and slaughters 15,000 Romans, taking another 10,000 hostage. As usual, he politely let the Italians go and made a point of being extra cruel to Roman prisoners. The message? I'm not at war with you, dear Italians. Just your grumpy Roman overlords. At this point, you'd think Rome had hit rock bottom, but no. That came in August 216 BCE, when Rome assembled the ancient version of throw everything at it, 80,000 men, to stop Hannibal at Cannae. Hannibal's response? Tactical poetry. With just 50,000 troops, he boxed the Romans in by the Aufidus River, used the cramped space against them, let them charge forward, and then surrounded them with his cavalry and flexible infantry. It was a military masterclass, unless you were Roman, in which case, it was the worst day of your life. Rome lost 50,000 men. Hannibal lost 5,700, and most of those weren't even Carthaginians, just Gauls who signed up for the adventure. By now, Hannibal seemed completely unstoppable. Southern Italy's city-states started flipping sides like pancakes. Even Capua, Italy's second most important city, joined Team Hannibal. Rome's influence looked like it might collapse entirely. But wait, plot twist. Central Italy and the Latin colonies stayed loyal. That meant Hannibal now had territory, but no backup. The rebellious cities needed constant defending. The Big Gaul uprising never showed up. His brother Hasdrubal was stuck in Spain. Carthage sent 0 fleets. And Hannibal? Still no siege engines, no reinforcements, and apparently no plans to storm Rome itself. Why? Historians argue, but maybe he never meant to burn Rome to the ground. Maybe, just maybe, this whole thing was a really aggressive way to ask for a better trade deal and some geopolitical respect. Either way, the Second Punic War had become a slow, grinding stalemate, and Hannibal, despite being the ancient world's MVP, was now stuck deep in Italy with no exit strategy. The Second Punic War, Rome learns to stop losing, mostly by running away. By now, Rome had finally figured out the vibe. Fighting Hannibal head-on equals massive funeral bill. So they came up with a bold new strategy. Don't. Enter Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, dictator of 217 BCE, and a man who made cowardice sound like strategy. Nicknamed Cunctator, the delayer, Fabius revolutionized the art of not doing anything too rash. His plan? Don't fight Hannibal directly. Just annoy him, block his supply lines, and starve him out like the world's most passive-aggressive siege. Hannibal, frustrated like a gamer with no internet, tried to take port cities like Neapolis and Tarentum, because, ports mean ships, and ships mean supplies. But Roman resistance was annoyingly solid. Even Nolus said no thanks 3 times. Despite all the tactical brilliance, Hannibal couldn't get one decent Mediterranean delivery route. Rome, battered, bruised, but still breathing. Somehow, after losing tens of thousands of soldiers and half its military dignity, Rome refused to quit. They ignored every peace deal Hannibal threw at them, probably out of sheer spite, and kept building more armies. Sure, another one got wrecked in Gaul in 216 BCE, but hey, who's counting anymore? Meanwhile, Carthage made some genius strategic decisions, like sending 13,500 men and elephants to Spain instead of reinforcing Hannibal, and wasting a similar army trying, and failing, to retake Sardinia. Brilliant moves, really. Rome must have loved that. Carthage did score some flashy wins. Syracuse defected in 214 BCE, Tarentum joined the fun in 212 BCE. But none of this helped much, because Hannibal was slowly becoming that guy at the party who brought all the energy early on and now just wants someone, anyone, to pick him up. The noose tightens. The real issue? Hannibal's supply problem wasn't going away, and neither was Rome's annoying persistence. He didn't have the manpower to garrison his new territory, so wherever he wasn't, the Romans waltzed in and took it back. When Capua, his big Italian ally, was besieged by 6 Roman legions in 212 BCE, Hannibal tried one last dramatic play, a fake-out march on Rome itself. Rome responded with a collective shrug and kept pounding Capua anyway. Bold bluff. 0 results. And through all this, Fabius' so-called do nothing but bleed him slowly doctrine kept working. Despite occasional rogue consuls trying to make a name for themselves with reckless charges, spoiler, most of them didn't make it. Rome steadily squeezed Hannibal into a tighter and tighter corner. By 207 BCE, Hannibal was boxed into Bruttium, the far south tip of Italy. Lovely beaches, terrible for launching major offensives. Meanwhile, Rome still owned the seas. No resupplies, no reinforcements, and no miraculous cavalry charge coming over the horizon. The Second Punic War had officially turned into a long, slow death spiral for Hannibal's once glorious invasion. The momentum was gone. The empire wasn't crumbling. And the guy who made elephants famous in Italy was now just trying to survive. The Second Punic War, when Spain, Sicily, Macedon, and everyone else got dragged into the drama. If you thought the Second Punic War was just a one-on-one grudge match between Hannibal and Rome, think again. This thing turned into an ancient world free-for-all. Spain, where Scipios went to die, and one came to win. In 215 BCE, Rome decided it was time to kick Carthage out of Spain. Things started well. The Romans crushed Hasdrubal at the Battle of Iberra, and even retook Saguntum, the city Hannibal had used to light the war's fuse. But momentum, like Roman legions, is hard to manage. By 211 BCE, both Roman commanders, P. Cornelius Scipio and Gnaeus Scipio Calvus, managed to get themselves killed in the Tater Valley, along with their armies. Classic Roman overconfidence. Enter their replacement, Publius Cornelius Scipio, a 25-year-old upstart who had all the ambition and none of the trauma. By 209 BCE, he pulled off a surprise heist and captured Carthago Nova, modern Cartagena, Carthage's main supply base and piggy bank in Iberia. Suddenly, Rome had silver mines, momentum, and a rising star with a growing ego. You can guess where this is going. Sicily, art heists, and island hopping. Meanwhile, on Sicily, things weren't going so well for Carthage either. Their ally, Syracuse, fell in 212 BCE despite the best efforts of 23,000 Carthaginian reinforcements. The Romans, led by Marcus Claudius Marcellus, a veteran of the First Punic War, took the city and, in a brilliant PR move, shipped tons of Greek art back to Rome. Nothing says we won like looted statues. By 210 BC, Sicily was firmly Roman again, because if there's one thing Rome hated losing more than soldiers, it was islands. Macedon, the side quest no one asked for. And just for fun, Macedon under Philip V thought it was a good time to join the chaos. Bad idea. Roman General Marcus Valerius Laevinus smacked them right out of the Adriatic and handed them off to the Aetolian Confederacy like a political hot potato. Macedon was now fighting a war it barely understood, in a region it couldn't control. Classic alliance misfire. Back to Spain, Scipio goes beast mode. Back in Spain, Scipio Africanus. He hadn't earned that last name yet, but don't worry, was collecting victories like Pokemon. He crushed Hasdrubal at Becula in 208 BCE, chased him out of Spain, and left him to be destroyed at the Metaurus River in 207 BCE by Roman forces. One brother down. Then came Ilipa, 206 BCE, where Scipio outmaneuvered yet another larger Carthaginian army. Spain, the place where the war had started, was now completely Roman. Scipio even scored Numidian allies, Massinissa and Syphax, though Syphax later changed sides because loyalty was optional back then. With Spain locked down and war fatigue spreading, Scipio had a new idea. Why not bring the war to Carthage's front porch? The Roman Senate wasn't thrilled, but eventually said yes, mostly because he was the only Roman general not getting repeatedly defeated. Italy, still a mess. While Scipio was busy becoming a legend, Hannibal was still in Italy, holding out with shrinking forces. Carthage sent another brother, Mago, with 14,000 men, but thanks to Rome's control of the seas, he couldn't land anywhere near Hannibal. Surprise. His army got stomped in Cisalpine Gaul in 203 BCE, and that was pretty much that for Italy. Scipio Africanus takes the fight to Africa. In 205 BCE, Scipio was elected consul and finally got the green light to take the war to Africa. He sailed to Sicily to prep, and by 204 BCE, he crossed to North Africa with 30,000 troops and 440 ships, because when Scipio does something, he does it in style. His welcome gift? A quick win over 500 Carthaginian cavalry, followed by another smackdown of 4,000 more. Then Massinissa showed up with his Numidian cavalry, fast, mobile, and just what Scipio needed. The Second Punic War was now in its endgame. Rome was bringing the heat to North Africa, and Hannibal, still stuck in southern Italy, was running out of time, troops, and options. The Second Punic War. Scipio burns camps and bridges, and Hannibal gets the summons. Just when you thought the Second Punic War couldn't get any messier, Scipio Africanus decided to turn North Africa into a military pressure cooker. In 203 BCE, he rolled up to Utica, thinking he'd wrap things up with a quick siege and call it a day. But surprise, Utica actually fought back, which apparently wasn't in the plan. Meanwhile, Carthage panicked and did what all ancient superpowers did in times of crisis: throw together a giant army and hope for the best. Gisco, son of Hasdrubal, showed up with 30,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. Pretty solid, until he was immediately joined by Syphax, the most indecisive Numidian prince of all time, who brought along a casual 50,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Together, they had a massive army, and instead of, attacking, they set up camp near Scipio and waited for winter to do the dirty work. Spoiler: Scipio doesn't do winter breaks. Scipio, being Scipio, didn't sit around. While peace talks dragged on, aka the world's most suspicious ceasefire, he played diplomat by day and spy by night. Once he knew the enemy camp layouts, he pulled a classic Scipio move: divide and destroy. In a night raid worthy of an action film, Roman forces torched both enemy camps. Fire, confusion, screaming Numidians, the works. It was a devastating success, and suddenly that 90,000-strong super army didn't exist anymore. Still not done? No problem. Let's crush another army. But Carthage wasn't ready to give up just yet. With Hasdrubal rushing in more reinforcements, because apparently every general in Carthage was named Hasdrubal, they scraped together another 30,000 infantry. Scipio, ever patient, stared them down for 3 days, and then went full predator. His cavalry flanked, the Numidian lines collapsed, and the African infantry crumbled like overbaked focaccia. Scipio's next move? Install Massinissa as king and have Syphax dragged off like a plot device whose arc had expired. Oh, and Scipio casually took Tunis too, just to really scare Carthage. Meanwhile in Italy, Hannibal gets a call no one wants. At this point, Carthage was sweating bullets. The city itself was now at risk, and they did what any desperate state would: try fake peace talks to stall long enough for Hannibal to get back from his extended vacation in Italy. In classic Punic fashion, they accidentally attacked a Roman transport fleet that had been blown off course, just to remind everyone that, diplomacy wasn't exactly their strong suit. So in 202 BCE, the peace officially evaporated. Hannibal, now older, wiser, and probably wondering why he ever swore that blood oath as a kid, finally returned home to defend the very city he left decades earlier. Carthage was out of moves. It had one last army, one last general, and one final shot. The Second Punic War was about to end, not with a treaty, but with a clash so decisive it would echo through history forever. The Second Punic War, Zama, when Hannibal met his match and Rome cashed in. It all came down to this. October 202 BCE, two titans of military history finally faced off on a dusty plain near Naragara in what would become known as the Battle of Zama. Not because it happened at Zama, but because Hannibal passed through it on the way. Naming battles was apparently very casual back then. Before the clash, Hannibal and Scipio actually had a real-life sit-down, possibly to negotiate peace. But let's be honest, Scipio had just crushed Africa, was riding high on victories, and smelled glory. Peace. Cute idea. He wanted a headline battle and a grand triumph parade back in Rome. The armies, elephants versus tactics. Scipio came in hot with 30,000 infantry and 5,500 cavalry, including Massinissa's elite Numidian horsemen, who were now firmly on Team Rome. Hannibal, in contrast, had a cobbled-together mix of Italian veterans, fresh recruits, and about 45,000 men, plus 2,000 cavalry from another Numidian, Tychius, not to be confused with the Numidian Hannibal actually needed. And let's not forget, 80 war elephants. Hannibal's dramatic flair was still intact. But Scipio? He came prepared. He opened channels in his infantry lines to let the elephants pass right through, then basically turned them around and sent them back toward their own side, where they caused peak chaos. Imagine investing in 80 tanks, only for the enemy to hijack them and drive them into your own ranks. That's what happened. The final blow. Hannibal's veterans put up a fierce fight, especially in the rear lines. But Scipio's Roman infantry held strong, and his Numidian cavalry pulled the ultimate Uno reverse card, circling back to hit Hannibal from the rear. The result? A total rout. Carthage lost 20,000 men. Rome? Just under 5,000, practically a light skirmish by Punic War standards. And just like that, the Second Punic War was over. Hannibal, ever the pragmatist, sued for peace. Rome, with the subtlety of a debt collector with a megaphone, laid out terms. Carthage could keep 10 sad ships and 0 elephants. No wars, unless Rome said so. Recognize Maecenas' kingdom. Yes, the guy who just helped beat them. Pay 10,000 talents over 50 years. Oh, and hand over southern Spain, thanks. The aftermath. Rome ascends, Carthage sinks. At the start of the Second Punic War, Rome and Carthage were relatively balanced. Hannibal was brilliant, Carthage was rich, and Rome, well, they had a lot of guys in boats. But in the end, it was Rome's superpower combo. Endless manpower, a war factory navy, and relentless adaptability that wore Carthage down. Scipio's tactics at Zama weren't just clever. They were the prototype of Roman military evolution. Learn your enemy, adapt your formation, crush them. Repeat as necessary. With Hannibal defeated and Carthage permanently declawed, Rome became the undisputed heavyweight of the Mediterranean. From this point forward, Rome wasn't just playing defense, it was building an empire. That's the epic and slightly ridiculous story of the Second Punic War, from elephants in the Alps to firestorms in Africa. If you enjoyed this campaign of ancient chaos, make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know which other wars you want brutally oversimplified and sarcastically retold. History isn't boring. It just needs a better narrator.